Okay, so we'll get started. Welcome, everyone. We're so delighted to have you join us this afternoon. My name is Emily Schumacher-Novak. I have the great privilege of serving as the Assistant Director for Education and Outreach in the Department of Justice, Peace, and Human Development at the USCCB. I'm so excited to welcome you to our Catholic Social Ministry Gathering virtual advocacy training webinar today. As you know, we're getting ready for the Catholic Social Ministry Gathering. It begins next weekend, and we're doing all of this prep work, and we're really excited for all of the things that we're going to do together, culminating in our Advocacy Day on February 9th. And we wanted to take some time today to sort of set aside and to think about how to make the most out of our time together with our members of Congress. As I think you know, our theme this year for the Catholic Social Ministry Gathering is Make Justice Your Aim, Rebuilding Together. The world has been facing many crises and inequities that have been exacerbated by the pandemic. And as Catholics, we are called to stand together in solidarity with our sisters and brothers and work together to rebuild our communities. And part of our call to do that rebuilding work is to engage with our elected officials, to bring our Catholic voice to Capitol Hill, whether in person or virtually. And by doing that, we can help to advocate for policies that protect the poor and vulnerable at home and abroad. And so when we do that, we bring the best of our Catholic social tradition with us. And so I'm so excited that you all have decided to say yes to this and to join us today in learning about how best to do that. Your voice is so valuable in sharing our commitment to the common good with our elected officials and their staffs. So thank you for participating in this important webinar to get ready to do that work and for participating in our shared work about living out the gospel call that helps us to better love our neighbors. We're excited to talk more about that at the actual Catholic Social Ministry Gathering starting next weekend. But today we're going to get a little taste of how to do that advocacy work together. Today we have two wonderful presenters to help us to think best how to sort of really dig in and make the most out of the time that we have with our members of Congress or their staff. As you know, much is different this year about Catholic Social Ministry Gathering because we're doing everything virtually, including our advocacy visits. And that means that we have lots of opportunities to include a lot of people who may not have been able to join us in the past. And so I think I'm really excited about this virtual advocacy, even though it's going to look a little bit different than it usually does. So Rachel Rybczynski is the campaign engagement specialist for CRS, and we have Florence French-Fagan, who's the Florida State Organizer for Bread for the World, and they both are great experts in this area and have lots of knowledge and tips to share with us today. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you, ladies, and I will share our screen with the PowerPoint.
Hello, everybody. Thank you, Emily, for the introduction. I saw a number of names that I recognize in the participant list. So welcome to everyone that I've met previously in person or online, and so happy to be meeting a bunch of new people today. As Emily mentioned, I am the campaign engagement specialist for Catholic Relief Services. My name is Rachel Rybczynski. Catholic Relief Services is the international humanitarian aid agency of the Catholic Church in the United States, for those of you who might be unfamiliar with us. Florence, sorry, just wanted to see if you were going to take a moment.
I'm so sorry. Hi, and I'm Florence French-Fagan. As mentioned, I am the Florida State Organizer with Bread for the World, and I just welcome everyone here today. Glad to be here with you to share this time together.
So we are very happy to be here today to talk to you about virtual meetings with our members of Congress. We're going to talk today about general best practices for meetings, and then we'll go into some tips for making virtual meetings like those you'll be participating in as part of the Catholic Social Ministry Gathering most successful. So before we jump into today's discussion, we'd like to pose this question. According to research, what is the most effective way for constituent advocates to influence their members of Congress? And to answer that question, the answer to that question comes to us from the nonpartisan organization called the Congressional Management Foundation, which studies Congress and in particular studies constituent advocacy and interactions with Congress. They conducted a survey of congressional staffers and asked them if a member has not yet arrived at a decision on a bill, which constituent strategies would have the most impact on his or her decision making. So this is what the survey showed. As you can see, in-person visits from constituents are the most influential action that you can take. Now, of course, due to COVID, our meetings are taking place online, but they still carry the exact same weight. So your participation in meetings through CSMG can make a real difference. And that should be something to be super excited and super proud of. So as we move into our discussion of virtual meetings best practices, it's important to once again recognize that our work is rooted in a faith that calls us into solidarity with our sisters and brothers, both in the United States and around the world, to see that their dignity is recognized by all. And I think that this quote from Pope Francis's new encyclical frames the importance of our advocacy so well. He writes, "If every human being possesses an inalienable dignity, if all people are my brothers and sisters, and if the world truly belongs to everyone, then it matters little whether my neighbor was born in my country or elsewhere. My own country also shares responsibility for his or her development. We are one human family, and we are responsible for one another, no matter where on the globe we are. So we gather to better educate ourselves and use our voices to lead the way to a better world for all people. As leaders of faith communities throughout our nation, your voices are incredibly valuable and powerful." Whew. All right, so we've rooted our meetings in our faith and demonstrated the efficacy of taking action in the most impactful way. So let's dive into the first of our two main topics, the key elements of meetings with your members of Congress. This overview is going to be helpful for both the current virtual setting and when we can finally return to in-person meetings. Also, this is going to offer a really good foundation for all legislative visits, whether this is your first or your 50th time on the Hill, in person or virtually. So, there are 6 main elements of a meeting: introductions, a summary of the issues, personal story sharing, the asks, and a discussion followed by a wrap up. Meetings are only going to be between 15 and 30 minutes, and the bulk of your time will need to be spent on the issues and the asks. We'll go more into what those will entail in just a few minutes. You'll spend time at your state delegation meetings going over each of these elements and who from your group will be on point for each. These meetings with your state delegations will occur on Monday, February 8th from 5:30 to 6 p.m. Eastern. It's very important that you attend your state delegation meetings so that you can all be on the same page and ready to be a cohesive unit. So let's take some time now to walk through each of those key aspects of the meetings and how your state delegation can plan for success in your meeting as a whole. All right, as you'll see on the advocacy visits worksheet, your group will have selected a timekeeper among other roles. As the meeting starts, it's going to be the timekeeper's job to discreetly note the start time and to track the time throughout the meeting and to let that facilitator know if the group needs to move it along. Meetings may run shorter than planned, and that's fine, but you never want to run over. Be sure to stick to the time that the meeting is supposed to begin and end, even if you start a little bit late. The exception to that rule is if a staffer tells you that they're able to stay on the call longer or that they need to cut it short. As I mentioned, they'll usually run between 15 and 30 minutes. So with that taken care of, any meeting, at any meeting, the first thing that you'll do in your virtual visit is take care of introducing your group as well as each person who's part of the visit. Someone should be selected to give a brief introduction of the group as a whole. In this group introduction, it's important to highlight that you are conducting this visit as a part of the Catholic Social Ministry gathering. It shows that you have other people behind you who also care about the issues for which you'll be advocating. So an example of this introduction might be something like this. Hello, my name is Charlie Brown, and I'd like to briefly introduce the group. We are passionate and dedicated Catholics from the state of Idaho. All of us are active members of our parish communities and different Catholic organizations in our state. We're here as part of the hundreds of constituents meeting with their senators today as part of the Catholic Social Ministry gathering about the importance of key domestic and international policies that support the dignity of all people. Just as an example of the way that you could put that together. So after the group has been introduced, each person will go around and very briefly introduce themselves by saying their name, their parish or organization that they represent, and most importantly, why each person felt it was important to be a part of the meeting. You might say something like, my name is Sue Smith. I'm a member of St. Francis of Assisi Parish and a leader in the Northeast Catholic community of Baltimore. I'm here because I believe my faith calls me to work for justice. Simple, clear, and concise, but it really gets across, why you're there. Some of you might have very large state delegations. In this case, you might decide to have one person introduce the group more thoroughly, and then the people who have speaking parts can introduce themselves before they speak their piece. Remember that the introduction should only take a few minutes before you move on to sharing about the issues. So I'd like to invite everybody on your own time to think through what your introduction might be. When we do this in person, we usually have kind of a pair and sharing opportunity. So consider taking the time with someone in your bubble to talk through what your introduction might sound like and to give it a practice a couple times. So after your group has introduced itself, do also make sure to give the staffer time to introduce themselves. Sometimes we get rolling and we forget that it's really important to give them a chance to tell us about themselves as well. So finally, you're going to want to start your meeting with a few words of gratitude. You want to thank the staffer for taking the time to meet with you, especially given the COVID context. Congressional staff, just like all of us, have had to adapt to new ways of working, as well as balancing work and family life. So be sure to recognize that and thank them. You'll also want to thank the staffer for something that the member of Congress has done recently. It's always good to start with gratitude for recent work before launching into a new ask. Spend some time exploring the website of your members of Congress before your meeting and try to find something specific for which to thank them. So the next thing is you'll want members of your group to briefly summarize the issues that you're there to discuss. You don't need to go into the specifics of the ask at this point, just present the issues to the staffer. It's a good idea to name a specific example here, and the backgrounders and other information you'll receive will provide you with some really good examples. This should be a short summary and should just name the issue and give one short example that elucidates it. You have the opportunity to learn more about the issues that you'll discuss as part of CSMG during the legislative issues briefing on Monday, February 8th from 3:30 to 4:30 p.m. Eastern Time. And I will ask that Julie make sure that that date is accurate. So please be sure to attend this very important session. The third part of the meeting is perhaps the most important part, sharing a personal story that highlights why you in particular care about the issues at hand. Members of Congress want to know what their constituents care about and why. You should think about experiences that you or people near you have had, or even reputable news that you've read, or stories that are shared in your preparation materials. So what makes you care about these issues in particular? For example, my master's degree is in international public health. So not only do I care about US support for fighting COVID-19 around the world because my faith teaches me that we must support every member of our human family, but I also know that diseases don't respect borders, and an epidemic anywhere in the world threatens human life everywhere. By protecting children, women, and men around the world against COVID-19, we're supporting their human dignity, and we're protecting the well-being of American lives and lives across the globe. As a human family, when one of us is strengthened, all of us are stronger. So that's what I might say during a meeting, but I encourage you to think about what your own story and connection to the issues might be. You'll want to designate one or two people from the group to handle this part, preferably one person for each of the issues. Make sure that there are people in your group who feel confident speaking about both the domestic and the international issues that your meetings will address. In light of the summary of the issues and the stories your group shared, this is when you'll make the asks. Someone in your group should state clearly and specifically what you would like the member to do and be concise. In fact, the ask has been written out for you in your preparation materials, and it is entirely appropriate to read the information directly from the page. They don't need to be memorized. It's important that all of the asks be expressed clearly and concisely. Make sure to give equal time and weight to each ask. After you make the ask itself, you should provide a couple brief supporting points, and the reference documents have these in detail as well. So please do take a look at the talking points before your delegation's planning session. Also, please recall that the policy asks have been carefully selected by the policy teams at the USCCB and other supporting organizations like Bread for the World and CRS. These are chosen because they're timely and impactful for such a large group of advocates to speak on together. It's really important that we stick to these issues for these meetings, even with the knowledge that there are so many other issues and policies that we as Catholics care about strongly. We can make the most impact if we speak with a unified voice. Alrighty, we're almost there, only 2 more parts of the meeting. So as time allows, after you've made the ask, the facilitator should encourage discussion with the staff, allowing them to ask clarifying questions and to have a conversation with you. The timekeeper and the facilitator should be aware of how much time is remaining. And at this point, ensure that they close discussion with enough time left to wrap up matters. So if in the conversation, the staff asks you a question that you don't know the answer to, it's okay. Members of Congress and their staff don't expect you to be experts. So don't feel pressured to be. Just say that you don't know the answer, but that you'll follow up to get one. And at that point, be sure to put any requests for follow-up information in your report back forms. So finally, it's time to wrap up. Select someone to be on point to close the meeting. They should thank all the staff and reiterate the asks. If there is any follow-up needed, to be sure to review the next steps on that. For example, if the staffer asked a question the group didn't know the answer to, assure them that somebody will get the information to them. The person in charge of wrap-up should also mention the reference materials that were sent to the office in advance. And since we're not able to exchange business cards right now, that person should also ask for the staff member's contact information so that they can send a thank you and any follow-up information after the meeting. It's important to select a person who will be responsible for sending that thank you email to the staffer on behalf of the whole group. You'll be provided with the information that you need for your thank you email after your meeting. So, quick review of what to do after your meeting. We encourage you to take a few minutes to debrief on a different Zoom link after your meeting. This will give you a chance to talk about what went well, what could be improved, and to make a plan for any subsequent meetings. Also, make sure to congratulate each other for a job well done. A member of your group should send that thank you note to the staffer with whom the group met. You'll receive guidance for the thank you email, so be on the lookout for that. If you are the note taker, please make sure to submit the Hill Visit Report form, which you see on the screen, as soon as possible. Be sure that you include any questions the office had or any requests for follow-up information. The appropriate staff from one of the supporting organizations will be sure to respond to the offices. And last but not least, thank your member of Congress and their staff for meeting with you by posting on social media and tagging their account. You can see the social media resources for sample posts. Thank the member of Congress and reiterate the ask in that post. Finally, celebrate your incredible effort to speak out on behalf of your sisters and brothers who are in need. Tell your friends, your family, and your community about your visit and encourage them to take action next time.
Thank you, Rachel. So now that we have gone over the basics of how to approach any meeting with a member of Congress, we're going to talk about the differences that come with virtual meetings since we're living in this COVID-19 period. Some of you are used to meeting in person, so we're going to hopefully give you some helpful tips for running those virtual meetings. This may seem obvious, but make sure you do the following things. Dress professionally. You're going to be on camera. Don't assume because it's virtual that you can just come however. Make sure that you dress professionally. Next, be flexible and charitable. Often staffers are taking these video calls from their homes, just like we are, and anything can happen. A staffer's cat or dog could walk across the screen, their kid could run in the room, or the internet may go out. As with everything during this challenging time, be flexible and charitable. Try to minimize distractions as much as possible, both by finding a quiet area for the call and by turning your phone off and putting it away during your Zoom meetings. Join the meeting link 5 minutes before the call begins. Close all of your applications except the meeting platform and any notes that you may need to refer to. Make sure that you don't log in any earlier than 5 minutes because your session is only 40 minutes long. You don't want to run out of time. To ensure that you have a strong connection, close all of your applications except the meeting platform and any necessary notes. Again, I'm reiterating that because that's so important. The note taker should have a page open for notes, and everyone should have the meeting outline worksheet and any other notes that they need aside from that. Please only have the meeting platform open. It might even be beneficial to print off the outline worksheet and use a piece of paper for notes so that your Zoom meeting can be the only one application that is open. While you're in the meeting, the only meeting controls that you need to worry about are the mute, unmute function and the camera on and off function. We recommend only using the chat if technical issues arise. For those of you who will be conducting your meetings in groups, outlining the roles and the order of each participant is critical in the virtual setting. Online, we don't have the same nonverbal cues to indicate who speaks next. So it's important to develop an outline of the flow of the meeting and stick to it. Take the time with your state delegation to work out the roles for the meeting and have them written down. It's also helpful to have backups identified in case colleagues' connection goes out. That way, someone is identified and ready to jump in and cover for them. What about those calls to Congress? So we just outlined a lot of tips for virtual meetings with members of Congress and their staff. But as part of CSMG, some of you might also be making calls to some of their members of the House. So we want to very briefly give a couple of best practices for when you make these calls. First, be prepared to reach an answering machine instead of a real person. The offices are really busy, especially at this time of year, when many of them are just setting up shop. They may not even have a full staff yet. Your call is still important to them. Stick to the script and treat it the same way you would a call with a member of the staff. This is not likely to be an opportunity for discussion. This will not be a scheduled meeting, so they most likely don't have the time to talk. Some staff might surprise you though, but that will be the exception. So make sure to introduce yourself, clearly state your ask, and follow the script. They will prompt you for your discussion if they have the time. Lastly, make sure that you hit all of the points in the script, but also personalize your call. So similar to when Rachel was talking about making your story personal, you want to do that on the phone call as well. Through your introduction and sharing a very short personal connection to the issues, you demonstrate your passion and dedication to the issues. Remember, your voice is as a constituent matters. So therefore, one of the most important parts of this is you. We have some frequently asked questions, but before we go into that, we'd like to ask if you have any questions. And Rachel, is the best place for them to enter their questions in the Q&A?
Yes, yep, that'll be perfect. So if anybody wants to enter into that Q&A, any questions that you have, we also have members of the CSMG Planning Committee on our call, so they can jump in with any logistical questions that anybody has. And we've got a little bit of time for that. And as Florence mentioned, we also have some frequently asked questions that we can talk through to get the ball rolling if people are still thinking.
While folks are thinking about their questions, I have two logistical things already. One, I recognize that a few of you are leaders of delegations, and we're so grateful that you and your delegation were here. And it looks like we hit our capacity for the Zoom call today, which has never happened. So we're so grateful that all of you are here. We will be sure to send you the link to the webinar as soon as it's ready to go. Hopefully just in a few hours, we'll have that ready and we can send it to you. So keep an eye out for that in your email, and then we'll post it on the CSMG site as well. And then second, Crystal had a great question about the leave behind packets that we usually do. State captains should be sending those leave behind materials when they confirm the meeting, which will have all of the thank you email and all of the other materials that are leave behinds. There's some of those materials that the state captains will have further instructions about how to send those maybe ahead of time as well. But I think we've got a few questions rolling in, so I'm going to turn it back over to you, Rachel.
Alrighty. The first one that I'm seeing is a question about whether we will be meeting with the staffer or if we might also be meeting with the member of Congress. And I think that that is entirely dependent upon the office, and it can even change on the day of. It's always a pleasant surprise when you end up having the member join the call when you're not expecting it. But one of the things that we always like to reiterate is that the staffers are super important. So definitely not a bad thing to be in a meeting with a staffer.
Absolutely. And I would just add that if you develop a relationship with the staffer has the ear of the member. So it's always good to establish that relationship.
For sure. These people are super bright, excited about what they're doing, and especially excited about the issues that they're working on. And so it's always good to have those staffers. But that's not to say that it's not also very exciting when the member is able to join the call. And you might know that ahead of time and you might not. So I'm learning how to do the panelist look at the questions. So I think I'm going to push the answer live. And I did that. Okay. I see a question from Nora about whether all the groups have the same questions, and I'm going to take to mean whether all the groups have the same asks to bring up at their meetings. And yes, this is one of the great things about CSMG. And one of the great things about being part of Team Catholic, we're all in this together. So you'll all be approaching with the same asks. And that's one of the things that makes this opportunity such an impactful opportunity. All right.
I see a question from Lisa Steiner. Who decides which people take on which roles? I believe that is going to be up to the state captains. Is that correct?
And it'll be part of the discussion that you have with your delegations. Sometimes that'll be when you have larger delegations, that's a process where, the roles have to be split up more. And if you're from a smaller delegation, maybe you have a larger role. But yeah, that'll be part of that discussion and why it's really important that everybody attends that state delegation meeting, which I saw that Julie placed in the chat for as far as times go. I see a question from Anne Avalon regarding how the Archbishop will be joining you for the meeting, which is very exciting. I'm wondering if Emily or Julie have any response to the question regarding tips for that, or if there are workshops that would be especially important for him to view.
That's a great question, and that's really exciting, Anne. That's awesome. Can you send us a note? I think you have both mine and Julie's emails, just to remind us about that, to make sure that there isn't any additional information. But having a bishop or an archbishop join you is really powerful. We have a couple of bishops who have joined us for CSMG in the past, and we have a few who are signed up this year. And it's exciting to have them join all of you as constituents to make that ask and to really bring the Catholic voice together. So I would say make sure that you all are able to mention it to your staffer when you open the meeting, or maybe ahead of time. And then it might be more likely that your member of Congress or your senator would join the meeting if they knew that the Archbishop was going to be there as well. But also know that all of our voices are important, and that when we all speak together and we have all of our voices at the same time, I think that that's a really helpful thing to remember, that there's power in all of us being there together.
Thanks, Emily. A quick question from Susan Tabor asked what the name of the nonpartisan group that polled the congressional staffers. That was the Congressional Management Foundation, so CMF. Yes.
There's a question from Amy. Should we be setting up these meetings via email or by phone, since they will hopefully be virtual and we'll need to send a Zoom link, ? Typically we set up our meetings by phone, but it seems email might be best given our virtual reality. I would say that emailing would be your best choice. You'll get a quicker response. You can also follow up with a phone call as well. And as far as the Zoom link, I can't answer that question. Can someone else answer that?
Well, and correct me if I'm wrong, Emily or Julie, but I think that for the Senate meetings, the state delegation leaders are the state captains, excuse me, are taking care of the meeting scheduling. And when it comes to the House calls, that those will be more individual. I find that email them, give them a phone call, get a hold of them any way that you can to set up those meetings. I saw that someone mentioned that it's really hard to get a hold of their senator's office. Yes, it is. Sometimes you got to be kind of persistent and take at whatever angle you can to get a hold of them. They, as Florence mentioned, they're super busy. They're setting up their offices right now. It's not because they don't care. It's just because it's the time of year when things get a little crazy on the Hill.
That's for sure. Yeah, Rachel, that's a really good point. If anyone is having difficulty scheduling it, either you're not hearing back or you've tried a couple of times, definitely let Julie or I know. If you're a state captain and you've been trying to reach out and you haven't had any luck, the state captain should have heard from Julie and we can respond to that email. And she will help assist us in seeing who else we can ask to help make those appointments. I saw one other sort of logistical question, Rachel. I just want to jump in quick. Loxy asked about whether Zoom is unstable. We had heard that early in the pandemic that folks were hesitant to use Zoom. It seems that's less of a problem now, but if your staff asks you to not use Zoom and to instead do a conference call, that's what we should do. We should follow their lead on that. And then we'll just sort of have to think about in our state delegation meetings, how do we sort of transition all of this and make sure that we only have a couple of people speaking instead of maybe more, because it's harder to keep track of whose voices are whose when we're on the phone instead of we're able to see one another.
From the experience that CRS has seen throughout this last year, we've had really good luck with most offices being open to Zoom meetings, but every once in a while you come across one where they just say, we're not doing that, and a phone call works.
I would say the same thing. We've met with all of our districts here in Florida last year, and everyone was really open to having meetings with us, more than one meeting. So they're embracing the virtual reality. There's a question from Bob. Is it appropriate to do background research on congressional persons? Absolutely, Bob. I think that Rachel mentioned this. You want to open your meeting thanking the congressperson for something. If there's nothing to thank them for necessarily, find something positive, something that you may have in common with them to get that relationship going.
I work with Catholic schools a lot, and I find that a lot of the staffers often say, "Oh, I went to a Catholic school," and that's a really easy way to open up conversation with the staffers. But always good to find something that you can mention. I saw that the senator, played this sport for this college or whatever. It all plays into just making that relationship building. I'm scanning through.
There's a question from Amy. Also, we already have a relationship with the staffer from a prior meeting. Should we work with them to set up the meeting? Absolutely. That's all part of that relationship that you have built. So for continuity, I would definitely suggest that you get in touch with them first.
So I see a question regarding the tip on closing all applications except for the meeting platform, and whether Google Docs for note-taking would be an all right application to have open. People have different levels of comfort with having more than one window open on their screen. I operate with 2 screens all the time, so I can have as many windows open as I want. But if you're operating on a smaller screen, it might be really hard to have more than one application open, which is one of the, or if you have an unstable internet connection, it's always good to minimize how many windows you have open. But if you're comfortable with it, if that is a way that you are used to operating, and you have the bandwidth to support it, totally fine to have an extra application open. It's just a question of comfort level and ability.
Absolutely. And there's nothing wrong with good old-fashioned paper. Have your notes written down on paper just in case technology fails you.
I see a question about whether we'll have the asks in advance of the meetings. Again, I encourage you to attend that legislative issues briefing on Monday, February 8th from 3:30 to 4:30 p.m. It looks like there's also a Q&A about a policy workshop that's going to be available for you. So lots of opportunities to have more understanding about the issues and about the asks. And I am not entirely sure, Emily, Julie, about how reference documents are getting out to people, but those will have a lot of information for you as well. Somebody chime in on that piece.
Yeah, the state captains, again, are really our lifeline. And so if any of you are serving as state captains, thank you so much. We're so grateful for your ability to sort of bring along the rest of us as we do these advocacy visits. The state captains will have all of that background information, what the asks are. There's a few things that are posted on the CSMG site right now about what are sort of like the beginning pieces of that, but definitely you'll want to attend the policy briefings, attend any of the policy workshops that are relevant to the area that you might be talking about or you're interested in, and really look at some of those background materials as well. It'll all also be posted in the CSMG platform once the conference goes live, and that starts on Monday. So even though the conference doesn't begin until Saturday, all of those materials will be live and ready to go for you starting on Monday.
Patrick is asking, is 3:30, is that Eastern time?
That's right. Yes, all of the times are Eastern time. We've tried to clarify wherever we can, but everything is Eastern time, and then, back it up as you need to.
There's a question from Father Lawrence. Is the February 8th policy review the same as the one from this past Monday?
That's a great question. So definitely we'll have some similar topics, but it'll be a chance for really like deep dive questions and answers for folks. So if you have questions about a particular area or a particular ask, definitely come with those questions to that session. There'll be policy webinars and policy workshops prior to that during the day. And then in the briefing will be a time for us to really spend time with those experts and ask the questions that we have. If you've been to CSMG before, you'll know that we often have that live in a room and we can ask questions with the microphone to the folks who are on the stage. It'll be similar to that.
This is not a question, but two pieces of advice. One is from Susan. She says, if you can't get their Washington office, try a local office. They can help, absolutely. If you have a cell phone number for a staffer, that's even better. Eugene says, Network has just released a 2020 voting record for all the members of Congress, and he finds that helpful. Barbara has a question. Can we assume we won't be able to meet with the senators because of the Senate trial that starts that day? Barbara, I would say never assume anything. Last year, we had meetings scheduled with staffers, with district directors, with legislative directors, and the congressional person would show up or the senator would show up. So always be prepared.
And one of the things that we usually comes up in our frequently asked questions, but we have a lot of questions today that are covering most of them, but this kind of goes along with that. Sometimes you might be scheduled to talk to the staffer. You might be going through your meeting with the staffer, and then all of a sudden the member pops in. And that's great, and that's exciting. It can be a little, can throw you off a little bit, but it's all right. Take a deep breath, do a super quick introduction, and go into the asks. Kind of do a mini reset because the member will want to be fully involved in the conversation. You just might have to shrink it down so that you can fit within the time. And then also don't be worried if the member just stops in for a moment and then pops back out again.
I think we have answered. No, here's a question from Barbara. Isn't February 9th the same day as the impeachment trial starting? I'm not sure. Does anyone know the answer to that?
I'm not sure on that in particular, I'll admit, but there is a ton going on, as we know, on the Hill right now. There's always a lot going on the Hill. It's you know, a little more busy than usual right now, but you are constituents. And that is the end all be all of it. They have a lot of busy things to do, but they care. They care about what their constituents think. And so even if the senator themselves is busy with something else, the staffer is there to give their full attention. So you should be good to go on that. I see that Julie is pinging me that she has a word on the impeachment.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Julie Bodner. I'm a policy advisor with the USCCB. And I just want to confirm, yes, that is the impeachment is starting that week. But we don't expect it to be a roadblock in scheduling meetings, even if the senator has to be on the Senate floor during the trial and the trial is happening during your meeting. There are a lot of staffers in his office or her office, and they may even find themselves unexpectedly available during that time. So we don't think it'll get in the way of our meetings at all. We encourage you to still reach out to their offices. And just to add, we don't need to comment on the impeachment trial. You don't need to let it distract from our message. So don't worry about kind of getting into some of the specifics there. The USCCB position is to have no position on it. So you don't have one other thing to worry and study up on. We're really just focusing on the CSMG asks. Thanks.
Agreed. Thank you very much, Julie. All right. I think that we've gotten through our questions. If anyone has any other questions, you always have the wonderful resource of your state captains. You also can always reach out to folks like Emily and Julie through the CSMG website. I'm sure it has contact information there. Reach out if you have specific questions. Otherwise, lots of opportunities for learning ahead of those meetings. Do you have any closing comments, Florence?
There was just one more question from Barbara. Probably answered now. She says, I'm a bit confused. Are we not going to meet with our House reps in groups, but only call them?
Yeah, I'm happy to answer that. Yes, that statement is correct. So we are encouraging folks to meet with their senators via Zoom and have scheduled meetings, but then we're encouraging the entire CSMG participants to call their members of the House on February 9th. So they'll be hearing from us. We'll have a phone script ready for you and an ability for you to sort of dial a number and then be connected directly into your members of Congress's office. And just like Rachel and Florence were talking about earlier, it's a chance for us to really lodge our issues and sort of tell them what we're thinking about it, but it isn't as formal as a Zoom call like this or as a scheduled meeting. So we can tell them as constituents, this is what I believe, this is what I would like my member of Congress to do for us. Here's why I believe that, and then and make it nice and short. We often encourage folks to do this on a regular, ongoing basis through both USCCB, CRS, Bread for the World. We all have action items that come up from time to time, and we encourage all folks to pick up the phone and to make that phone call because it is such a powerful way to use our voice. So yes, this year we're mostly doing Senate meetings and then individual House calls with all of our representatives.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Those are really great questions. There are just two questions we want to make sure that are covered. What if the person that you're speaking to is actually supportive of your ask? Thank them, obviously, and ask them to go to the next level. Ask them to be a champion. Ask them if they could get their colleagues on board. That's always a way to sort of gain more support. And then the other question is the opposite. What if the member opposes what we are saying? And that's perfectly okay. So whether it's in line with our thinking or not, remember you are still the constituent. And if there are people in their district or state who hold a different view, they need to hear it. So that's really, really important. Those are all the questions that I think we want to make sure were covered. Any last remarks, Rachel, before we sign off and thank everybody for being here?
I'm just really glad that we had the opportunity to meet with you all today. CSMG is a really exciting opportunity, and we're making history doing it online this year. So I'm glad that everybody gets the opportunity to participate in this very important time in our country's history.
Absolutely.
That's right. Yeah. Can everyone just join me in saying thank you so much to Rachel and Florence for all of your wonderful work. I wish you could hear the many rounds of applause that I'm sure are going on at computers across the country as we listen to all of your great remarks. I want to say thank you to everyone who joined us today as well. It's so good to have so many folks excited about advocacy for CSMG. We've been working so hard to make sure that it's a good experience for you and that you have an opportunity to really bring the best of our Catholic social teaching to the public square, to our elected officials. I want to get you excited about CSMG and to let you know that if there are any members of your delegation who would prefer to listen to this webinar in Spanish, we are doing it again tonight at 8 p.m. with a couple of our other colleagues from CRS and Bread for the World and USCCB. So that's an opportunity. Check the CSMG site to register for that if you haven't already. And then to log in to CSMG, February 6th, we'll begin with our opening mass with Archbishop Gomez. We have remarks from Cardinal Tagle from the Vatican. Dr. C. Vanessa White is doing the response on that first day, and there are going to be so many wonderful policy and community workshops of lots of information for us and really a lot of opportunities to engage. Hopefully we have all done our pre-work so that we can listen to the sort of like deep dives that folks have prepared for us that will be ready to go on Monday when the CVent site or the CSMG site launches. But then when we log in, it's going to be all about questions and answers. So bring us your questions. This is your opportunity to engage with policy experts and community experts and folks who have been doing some thinking about some of the issues that you really care about. So bring those questions and have a good conversation with your colleagues about that. So we're so excited for those things. I just want to say again, remember that your state delegation meeting, block this time off, Monday, February 8th, 5:30 to 6:30 Eastern time. And we have those Zoom links all set up for folks through their state captains. So look for an email from them, pay attention to those emails from your state captains, and then your Senate meetings will be sometime during the day on Tuesday, February 9th, in addition to those phone calls to the House. So thank you everyone so much. Thank you, Rachel. Thank you, Florence. Thank you, Julie, for your assistance on the back end. We're so excited. Can't wait to see you all again on the 6th through the 9th.
Thank you all. See you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.